feed and then I'll close it down, but we will still be live streaming the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Feed and then I'll close it. Okay, that says we should still be live streaming. I've just closed it down. Yep, live streaming on YouTube. Hello, Charlie. Welcome.
Hello, good afternoon. Nice to see you, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, you too, Charlie, mate. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you taking time out of your hectic and busy schedule to come and talk to us today about smart recovery. If I could just maybe start with, just for anybody that's never heard of smart recovery, tell me all about it.
I certainly can. Okay, so SMART stands for Self-Management and Recovery Training, is the first thing to say. And Smart Recovery is a charity registered in Scotland and in England. It's been registered in its current form coming up for 10 years now, so about 2016. So we've not been around for a huge amount of time, certainly not generations, which is why we like to do lots of awareness raising about us. And we are a charity that provides support for addiction recovery. And when I say the word addiction, I'm talking about all forms of addiction. So any type of problematic behavior. I think a lot of the time when you say the word addiction, people's minds automatically jump to kind of substances and
Yep.
substance use. But our program supports people with behavioural difficulties like gambling, shopping, exercise, sex, porn, anything at all that basically triggers that kind of reward mechanism in your brain that you can become habitual with and then potentially lack some control over. The program is essentially based on like an empowerment model. And we talk about discovering the power or rediscovering the power of choice, because we think a lot of people who are in active addiction have lost that feeling of power. They've lost that feeling of control, and they've kind of lost that line of sight to how to make kind of better and healthier choices for themselves. It's quite a simple program in that it has kind of 4 points to it, or 4 chapters, if for want of a better word. So the first point is all about building and maintaining motivation. And within that part of the program, you will find some scientific rationale. What is motivation? How do we build it? How do our minds and bodies kind of respond to motivational factors? And then you'll find some tools and techniques to use as well, practical things that you can do to help motivate yourself. Lots of things around reminding ourselves about what's important in our lives and what isn't, and taking us back to what makes us truly happy. And then the second chapter is all about coping with urges, or some people call them cravings. And again, within there, you'll find the science about urges and cravings. So there's some really interesting kind of facts about it. If someone's feeling an urge to do something, we know through research, it roughly lasts about 20 minutes. And so within the kind of coping with urges and cravings part of what we do, it's about understanding what an urge is, what it feels like, how it manifests itself, how to recognize it as it's happening. And then it's about helping to navigate the urge, not necessarily control it, but just to recognize it for what it is, know that it's only going to last a certain amount of time and do things in that time that are better for you. And then how to kind of track, log your urges and get better insights into your kind of rhythmical sort of behavior around what you're doing. And then the third chapter is all about managing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And again, we usually start with the science. How do actions happen? They usually start with a thought. Our thought becomes a feeling, and then we usually act on that thought and feeling. And we'll either act in a positive way or a destructive way. All depends on how we're feeling. So that chapter kind of teaches you all about, gives you good insight into what drives our actions, basically, and how to manage some maybe negative thoughts we have about ourselves. So some people might have heard of like imposter syndrome, where there's a voice that's telling you you're not worthy, you're rubbish, I may as well go ahead and do this destructive behaviour because nobody cares about me, or I'm not worthy of anything. So we help people to challenge that thought process. We help them to challenge those negative thoughts, and then we teach about how thoughts become behaviours. And again, there's lots of tools and techniques in there that you can do around distraction, managing your thoughts, writing your thoughts down on paper, seeing them for what they are. And then the fourth element of it is all about living a balanced life. And that's about reminding people that we do have a choice, that everything is about balance, and it's when certain things become unbalanced. So it's called the Smart Recovery 4-point program because they're the 4 kind of chapters within it. And what I say to people is, imagine that I'm about to hand you a great big toolbox with those 4 drawers in it. And what you're going to do is you're going to take that toolbox with our guidance and with our support, and you're going to dip into those drawers, and you're going to curate for yourself like your own kind of recovery journey. So on different days, different parts of that program will work for you differently. You'll fall in and out of love with different elements. What maybe worked for you a few months ago might not be working now. But all the different tools and techniques, they're all based on cognitive behavioural therapy. They're all based on motivational interviewing. And all we do is we provide a cradle of support that enables people to navigate through that journey and establish for themselves what's right for them. Okay. The majority of people that use smart recovery over time find themselves landing in the abstinence, or some people use the word sobriety space, but it's certainly not a prerequisite at the outset of the journey. So we kind of sit in between the abstinence pathway and the harm reduction kind of pathway. We sort of hover in between, and we accept all roads to recovery because we understand that obviously we're all individual humans, aren't we? And one size doesn't fit all.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And then, so that's kind of what the program is and how it's contained. It does have a scientific basis. There's lots of research out there that's researched it. There's loads of research that looks at SMART and 12-step fellowships and who accesses it and the demographics. And it's actually all very similar. The philosophy is the same. The approach is just slightly different. But essentially, we'll champion all roads to recovery, Anne-Marie. We don't really care what you're doing as long as you're getting better.
Absolutely, Charlie. And that's why I wanted to do this. It's really important that people have more choices and more chances, because one equals the other. So I know that cognitive behavioural therapy plays a huge role in the Smart Recovery Empowering programme. Could you maybe talk to me a wee bit more about that?
Yes, certainly can. So there are different, lots of people will have heard of CBT, probably in the kind of mental health services space. And lots of people will have heard it maybe being used alongside counselling or person-centered kind of therapies. What CBT essentially does is it teaches you about your cognition. So it essentially helps you to look into some of the thought processes that structure your beliefs and your belief system. And it particularly addresses any fears or anxieties or worries that you may have about a situation or a thing or a relationship or a process that you need to go through. It helps you to take back power because it helps you to understand that a lot of these things can be in your mind and in your thoughts, and how you can turn those thoughts into seeing something a bit more positively. And then it helps you to understand essentially how that belief structure in your mind then manifests itself in your behaviours. So CBT will ask you to explore what's going on in your head about a situation. It will then get you to kind of look at it in an objective way, almost kind of step outside of yourself and kind of see the nuts and bolts and the facts versus the reality. And it helps you to dispute any maybe slightly irrational beliefs that you may have had. And then the therapy part of it is you essentially kind of train your brain away from that anxiety space of that particular situation that you're in.
Brilliant.
And that's
Absolutely
essentially
brilliant.
how it works. It's like it kind of doesn't trick your brain, but it sort of it retrains the way you are thinking about a certain situation or a certain thing that you need to do, and it helps you to gain control over that. And it also helps you to see the options that are available to you so that you can choose. The other thing CBT does is it trains you to give space around an issue. So it might be that I get a thought, a feeling, and a behavior, and I act on it, and that all happens really quickly, like in less than a second or within like a 2 second space. And CBT slows all that down. You recognize the thought, you pause for breath, you recognize how you're feeling, you pause for breath, and then you decide how you're going to act. And all CBT does is it gives you more space between the thought, the feeling, and the behavior, so you can make a more healthy choice for yourself.
That's brilliant, Charlie. You've gave a really comprehensive overview there of the 4-point program, and also how smart recovery helps us to focus on self-reliance and building the practical skills, and the specific tools within that 4-point program that do that. So thank you for that. And if people are interested, obviously they can do a wee Google and they can look up more and they can get in touch. I know there's also a massive peer element to the program. So the peer support is in the SMART model. What is it that makes the SMART approach to peer interaction unique compared to, say, other recovery groups?
Yeah, thanks for prompting me on that, because actually peer-to-peer support, or as it's sometimes called, mutual aid, that is the foundation of smart recovery. So it was the SMART program was curated or invented, for want of a better word, by some key people working in the mental health field, psychologists and psychiatrists working in America, Australia, and the UK. Okay. And it was, while it is rooted in science and is CBT based, the whole premise of smart recovery is peer-to-peer support. So we know that the power of mutual aid absolutely works in addiction recovery. 100% it works. Nobody else can really help you or advise you to get out of that hole that you're in a way, unless they've been there themselves. There's a wonderful analogy of somebody with depression and anxiety, and it's a drawing, and they're in the bottom of this pit, and a certain professional comes along and stands at the edge of the hole and looks down in and says, "Oh, I see. Yeah, you've got that diagnosis. You might have addiction or depression or anxiety, and I know how to get you out there." But they stand at the top of the hole and look down and try and help. And then a psychiatrist might come along and do the same, or a friend or a family member. But what somebody with lived experience does is they see you down in that pit and they climb down into it with you. And they're in the bottom with you, along your side by side with you. And they say, "Do you know what, mate? I've been here myself. And together, and we're going to help you climb up and out of it." So that's the kind of analogy that I use. So smart recovery is founded on mutual aid, people supporting people. And that is how our program is delivered.
And I love that. I love that, that analogy or the vision, of the person who's in recovery bringing a step ladder down, telling their own story more or less, because that's how I do it, right? I give someone the identification about where I was, like where they are. So, this idea that we meet somebody where they're at, but essentially we don't leave them there. We help them out, and I think I always say that there's so many well-meaning, kind, compassionate, when I'm being particularly generous, I'll say highly professionalized, really, really good people, but they don't know how to get us out the hole we're in. Do you know what I mean? They don't have that essential identification that is, it's unparalleled to get that therapeutic value from, one person in addiction helping another. There's a depth and weight to my story when I tell it to someone else who's suffering, where they actually say, "Oh yeah, you do understand. You actually get it." So you can't manufacture that depth and weight out of professionalism. You can't say, no matter how professional and kind and compassionate the person is, they won't get that what's needed, and what's needed is that connection. I like what Jonathan Harry says about that. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. It's connection, and I agree with that. I do agree with that. Although I think it's incredibly hard to get the connection with it, sobriety. But in the initial stages, you can get that. You can connect with people in that despair, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you've mentioned there that addiction's often tied to underlying mental health conditions, and that smart recovery addresses that co-occurring mental health condition in its participants. And that's a pretty bonus. That's another free lunch, basically, isn't it, for the public health experts? And I know that many individuals, regardless of their pathway of recovery and what path they try to choose, they experience setbacks during their recovery journey. So how can you tell me how does smart recovery help participants cope with relapses? And what's your view on relapse as part of the recovery journey?
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the mutual aid element of what we do is really powerful, because essentially the door is always open. So we know that lots of people who have a mental health need and an addiction support need at the same time find it really difficult to access services, because often a service will say, well, you need to have addressed one to a certain extent before we can accept you in another. So a lot of mental health services will struggle to accept somebody still in active addiction, especially if it's a substance use, and they need them to get better from that, and vice versa. So we've got this crazy system, haven't we, that basically ping pongs people between the mental health service space and the addiction recovery space, which I don't, where that's come from, I don't know, and it doesn't make any sense. But you can access the Smart Recovery Programme at any stage in your addiction recovery journey, even if your recovery hasn't begun yet. And that also applies for whatever mental health needs that you may also have. We are not mental health specialists in any way, shape or form, and we're not a treatment service. But what we do understand is, I don't think I've come across anybody yet with problematic behaviours or an addiction that doesn't have some kind of mental health support need as well. I'm not so sure that even exists, Anne-Marie. Do you? I don't.
Yeah, no.
I've never, and I don't think I've come across anybody yet that say only has a problem with alcohol, completely isolated, and no other issues, whatsoever. So it's absolutely bonkers that we try and separate the two. When it comes to supporting people, so what the other thing that we see is, as people do navigate through their addiction recovery journey, they make a lot of realizations about themselves and their behaviors and the impact they've had on others, which is really hard on your mental health as well. So we help them to acknowledge that. And so the mutual aid meetings are run by facilitators. It's a completely non-judgmental space. None of it is stigmatizing at all. You can be at any stage in your recovery journey, or even still active in your addiction, and you can be not necessarily having mental health treatments, because what we do ask of you is that we have a code of conduct in the meetings. So you're more than welcome to attend, but you just mustn't obviously use in the meeting, turn up under the influence. Everyone needs to be polite and respectful and remind each other why they're there. So we are able to hold a safe space for everybody, regardless of that status. We also know, millions of people know this, that recovery from anything, whether it's a mental health or addiction or both, is rarely a linear journey. You never kind of go off the start and it's just great, gets better and better and better. Most people will have a wobble or a relapse at some point. And again, we come at it from a non-judgmental space of, a relapse can be seen as a normal part of the journey, or even an expected part of the journey. And the most important thing is that you learn from that. A relapse is okay. It's devastating when it happens, but we find that a lot of people will learn a huge amount about themselves and what drives their addiction when they're navigating through a relapse, or they come out the other side. If a If a mutual aid group smart facilitator experiences those problems or has a lapse or relapse themselves, we wrap around them and we support them. So we stay connected to them. We support them to stop facilitating for a while, and usually about 3 months. We encourage them to focus back on their own recovery as well. We keep them connected to the smart community. We agree a verbal contract with them as to how much contact they would or wouldn't like from us during that time. Okay, so we agree that. Would you like us to keep in regular contact, or do you just want us to go away and leave you alone? And you'll pop up, you'll resurface when you're ready. So that's all agreed with them. And we'll keep in contact depending on that agreement. And then when they are kind of back feeling stable again, and when they're ready again, we onboard them back into being a smart facilitator. And the same goes for participants as well. So that's how we view mental health and addiction in the same space. We don't separate the two. We don't pigeonhole the two. We don't insist that one is dealt with prior to another. We see it all as you are a human being, and we're here to support you. And if you relapse, it's a case of we'll support you through it, and we're hoping that you're going to learn from it, and we'll bring you back into that space as soon as you're kind of ready. So
I love that. It's a very similar verbal contract happens with people in other, recovery groups where if they were in the position where they were maybe chairing the meeting, they'll be asked to step back from that. And I think there's a suggested guideline in some of the 12-step fellowships in particular of waiting a year until you're going to take the chair. I think in some of the newer 12-step fellowships, it's 90 days, which would, affirm the same as you guys. But I think that's crucial to have that verbal contract of we're here for you if you need us. Do you want to keep in touch? And we'll let you go if you don't. The door swings both ways, but we're here, we're definitely here if you need us. I think that's crucial because sometimes I'm one of those unusual people in that when I first went to my very first meeting, I've not relapsed since then, but obviously having attended those groups for 27 years now, I can see that is definitely, I don't know if it's a minority experience, but I know I'm probably in maybe a 15-20% of people who have that experience. It's certainly more common for people to relapse, and I know the research says 4 or 5 relapses before, somewhere between 4 and 7 relapses or 4 and 7 attempts before we really get stabilized in our recovery. So that's really, really helpful as well. But one of the things that was said to me, and I really wasn't ready for it at all, but it made huge impact at the time, was you need never use again. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I never signed up for like this ever for the rest of my life. Hello. But the impact of that statement was really, really powerful. It was like, if you do this program, and in this case it would be SMART. In my case, it was, the 12 steps. If you do this and you try and work it, you need never use again. And that was both hugely attractive and similarly repellent. It was like terrifying, but also scarily wonderful. And obviously the whole thing that the 12-step fellowships have around a day at a time, like not to be worrying about the rest of my life, just keep it in the day. And I know that SMART has a similar focus as well. Just keep it right here, right now.
So important to just keep looking forward. We do encourage people to reflect on the past or how they've been, but we discourage kind of deep dives into that. So in a mutual aid meeting, people might talk about how they felt over the last week or the last month. And to talk about that, to acknowledge it, to maybe digest it a bit, but then it's about, okay, so where am I now?
Yeah.
What am I going to do tomorrow? So it's a similar philosophy, is it? That just your past does not define you, your behaviors do not define you. we're human beings, we're people, we're not our behaviours, and everybody deserves a second, third, fourth chance, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Charlie, just I know from my own experience with 12 step fellowships during the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the recovery programs went online. Did you notice anything about how Smart Recovery adapted to those digital meetings? Have you noticed any long-term changes or improvements as a result?
I mean, it was a massive change and a big shock to the system, because before, pre 2020, around 2019, nearly all of the Smart Recovery program was all delivered through in-person mutual aid groups or via person-centered one-to-one counselling and therapy sessions. And obviously, like, all of that just completely stopped. But what is amazing about the whole recovery community, actually, this is not just Smart Recovery, this will be 12-step, all kinds of other different approaches, is that uprising of the community that basically said, we've got to stay connected. None of us had ever even heard of Zoom or MS Teams before. Video conferencing was something that was done over kind of in America, wasn't it? So it was incredible that all of the recovery organizations had that massive will, that feeling of we can't turn our backs on this. We've got to facilitate people coming together somehow, in some way, shape or form. We can't all just ignore each other or stay behind our closed doors for goodness knows how long this is going to take. So we did what the rest of the world did, was pivoted online, found out what this thing called. We had a really rubbish meeting platform before. It was just totally dysfunctional. So we got rid of that. We adopted Zoom and Teams technology like everybody else. We got word out there. The first thing that we did was we supported facilitators running local groups. We got the Zoom license for them. We helped them set up an email account if they needed it. We individually trained them all how to use Zoom. We helped them to produce posters that they stuck up at their venue to say, we can't meet here anymore. Here's the link. So it started with the local groups pivoting to online. And again, it was a bit start-stop for the first 6 months, but those people that had been meeting in person started to meet online. We also had set up national online meetings as well. So imagine a local group that would have been meeting somewhere locally went online, and that's maybe 6 or 7 people. We also set up national open online meetings, an open Zoom link, advertised on the internet. Anybody can turn up from anywhere across the whole country. And we still to this day get upwards of 60, 80, 100 people attending the open national online meetings. So
isn't that fantastic?
It's amazing. So within the first year of the pandemic, we resurrected a huge amount of online. We had 500 meetings running a week prior to the pandemic. Lockdown happened and it went to 0. And then within 6 months, we built up to about 100. And within the first year, that grew a bit more. We've just run a report now, and we're back up to the 500 meetings a week. So it's taken a while to recover. It went down to about 300. But what we have done is we've kept the online community. So now we've got Smart happening in the community, in person, face-to-face meetings. We've got the big national online open meetings still happening. And we've also got we've then also got so we've got national online, local online. We've had some services, some drug and alcohol services started running clinics as well, telemedicine kind of online clinics, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. And then we've also got face-to-face in-person meetings running back up again. So it's really just this year that we've got back up to the activity levels that we were at before. But what's really incredible is that community stayed connected throughout the whole journey, the whole thing. Some of our facilitators have wanted to go back in person, but I think so many people are used to online now. It's convenient. it's confidential. I tell you, the biggest thing it did do is it provided a level of anonymity that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
Because obviously you can sit with your camera off and your microphone off. And the other thing that we saw towards the tail end of the pandemic was lots of new people coming along. So people, absolutely, alcohol consumption went up during the pandemic. We know that now, don't we? We saw
Yeah.
the sales of it. We know that people will have developed addiction from being isolated at home, from not having a routine, not having to be in the office. And after the pandemic, maybe realised, oh, you know, that drink that I used to have after work has crept into lunchtime, which has now crept into mid-morning. I'm now really struggling at 3 o'clock in the afternoon kind of feelings. And so the online meetings are really helpful for people in the pre-contemplation phase that just want to listen and connect and maybe slowly realise that they might need some support.
Brilliant. That's been incredibly useful, isn't it? The whole online. I remember that, again, thinking about the wee meme, wee image at the time. It was a wee devil saying, "Oh, we've closed down all the online A and any smart meetings," and then there was a wee angel, on the other side saying, "Yeah, but we've took it into everybody's living room." Do you know what I mean? So that I know loads of people now who came in through that sort of anonymous coming on to a Zoom meeting, keeping the camera off, just having a listen. So I'm sure it'll be the same for you guys. And like you said, the way the community responded was incredible. It was like within days, there were just meetings sprung up all out. And I think one of the things that I've witnessed in Glasgow has been there's been this sort of massive crossover of,
Mm.
I don't know if therapeutic knowledge is the right thing to call it, but within the 12-step community, there's sort of aficionado types who do stuff very literally, and there's different types of
Mm.
um sort of people who do the program differently. So you've seen this real crossover of knowledge coming, particularly from the States, which obviously you guys, your stuff was born in the States as well. So you've saw that real infusion of, but I think therapeutic knowledge was probably the nearest thing I could describe it as. And I'm sure that you guys have experienced something similar to that as well.
I have, just in my role as chief exec of Smart, so I've not experienced the 12-step programs, but thanks to everyone adopting online technology, I've been invited and welcomed into NA, and I've been to a CA meeting online. I've been able to observe a Narcotics Anonymous meeting online. I'm sure was there a video or a recording of, was it a prison-based
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
mutual aid meeting? There was something based in prisons that I got a great insight into via online technology as well. So
Yeah.
the cross-fertilization of insights,
Yeah.
philosophies,
Yeah.
knowledge, actually seeing 12-step in action was amazing for me as well, instead of it just being this theory. I can go and buy the book and read it, but to actually hear the conversation, to see how it was done. So
Yeah.
actually, it's been thanks to those online meetings that I've definitely benefited, and my
Yeah.
knowledge and awareness has massively increased. I think
Yeah.
it's opened up the doors to people trying all different types. There's Dharma recovery, isn't there?
Definitely.
There's meditation and Dharma, and sort of connected to some Buddhism type of
Yeah.
philosophies as well. So to be able to kind of digitally open your door to let people in so that they can observe and learn, I think is,
Yeah.
amazing.
It's absolutely phenomenal. And like you, I've saw people sort of cross-fertilize as well and use the smart tools and, much to some people's disgust, I must say, like to use both. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, why would you be offended by that? Why would you be disgusted by that? And then I'm not even talking about like 12-step aficionados or smart recovery aficionados. I'm talking about people outside, in the sector going, you can't use both. And I'm like, yeah, you can.
You can, because the philosophy is the same. It's about, we all come together because we've all got lived experience. We're not going to judge each other, and we're going to help each other recover from addiction. It's
Yeah.
exactly the same The end
Aye.
game is the same, isn't it? And the approach through the mutual aid is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
We know,
Yeah.
oh, there's some, I know, part back to research and statistics, but there's loads of research out there. We know about it's at least a third people use blended approaches. They use 12-step and smart
Yeah.
recovery. Most of my because lived experience is at the core of what we do. So the staff team, smart recovery organisation, the way it's run is all of us have lived experience of some, shape or form, whether it's direct or indirect in that sense. But and we know that even members of my staff, I have members of staff who are AA sponsors, but they work for Smart Recovery. It's just
Yeah.
all part of the same recovery movement. It's just slightly
Yeah.
different approaches to it. And I
Aye.
do believe that I didn't necessarily want to eat or dress in the clothes that I wanted to last week, and smart might suit me now, but
Yeah.
it might not in 5 years' time, and something else might chime with me
Yeah.
in that chapter in my life. I think
Yeah.
I'm not the same person I was when I was 21, so what worked for me then probably isn't going to work for me now. So we're
Charlie, that is so spot on. There's so many people, and I reserve that right as well to walk away at any point from any tool that isn't working for me anymore and to try another. Can I ask you a wee bit maybe about the role in policy and the broader impact to smart? Like, do you think that the UK government or the Scottish government or any of the sort of bodies across the UK are doing enough to support models like smart recovery? What policy changes would you like to see that could help people
yeah.
struggling with addiction?
Okay, so for one of the difficulties with us being a national charity and not a local regional one is there is no central government pot of funding that we can draw on or apply to. There aren't, as they call it in other parts of the world, federal funds. All of it is dispersed, if you like, through local authorities. And we know that those budgets have got smaller and smaller over the years, but the problems got bigger and bigger. And if you're in receipt of that kind of funding, then you're going to prioritize treatment, aren't you? You're going to prioritize saving people's lives. Let's be honest. In the addiction world, if you've got a pot of money, you're definitely going to prioritize your treatment services, the spiky end of it, saving people's lives, keeping people well, looking after people's hepatitis status, tissue viability, all those different kind of things. And then that's that. And then tends to be that policy, or however you want to talk about it, where the funding flows, you've then got recovery that sat somewhere else. And I think it's bonkers that there's recovery and treatment, and there seems to be a bit of a gap in between. And what I would love to see is mutual aid, peer-based recovery being brought closer into the treatment space and being given, and lived experience given just as much kudos as a professional qualification, if I'm
Yeah.
honest. I would like to see if anybody is admitted to hospital, especially if it's through A&E or a crisis moment, if there is an indicator of addiction or substance use, that they get a peer with lived experience at the bedside
Yeah.
instantly, straight away. I'm down in the pit with you. You've been sat in A&E all night. They've rescued you from,
Yeah.
prevented you from dying. We've rescued you from an overdose or something like that. Or you could be very vulnerable and have been beaten up in the street and been brought in. But if there is an indicator of mental health and addiction in that person, peer support instantly at the bedside to say, I've been where you are. Because I
Absolutely.
do believe that would reduce the DNA rate, that the people that
Yeah.
don't turn up to their appointments. I think it
Yeah.
would encourage people to engage with the medical professions if they needed to. Um, yeah, I have a strong opinion and feeling about that. I think it's crazy that recovery is one in one space and
Yeah.
treatment is the other.
Absolutely. I completely echo both those sentiments. And in the US, 7% of all addiction treatment funding is directed and ring-fenced towards lived experience organisations. And I asked a question the other day about how far away we were from that in the UK to the collective voice panel down at the Liverpool, the Labour conference or convention in Liverpool. And unfortunately, the lived experience chap, it was Dave Hyam. Yeah, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but he said that he felt that we were quite a distance away from it because lived experience recovery organisations were quite a new thing in the UK. And I didn't correct him because, our very first lived experience recovery organisation was Clouds House, which is over 48 years old.
Mm.
And actually the lived experience movement in the UK, it was lived experience organisations who started this sector. It was years later before the sort of big statutory boards got involved, and then the big charities, obviously, in the last 15 years, So I was a bit disappointed by that answer that, his understanding was it was a new thing when actually, and how long smart recovery's been going. But the second point that you made about, having a lived experience appear right there at the hospital bed. That is bang on the money. We've got a programme in Scotland, and it's a tiny programme. I would love to see it nationally rolled out. It's in a few of our hospitals. It's called the Navigator programme,
Okay.
and it's set up by Medics Against Violence. They're superb, and it's all people that are in recovery. And they're in the hospitals and they wear like these ridiculously bright pink t-shirts. And if anybody comes in with, inebriated in any way or in an accident or a knife, any sort of fighting or violence, they get a peer and they get a conversation with a peer. And then, if the connection is made, numbers are exchanged, and then that peer will take them to either, an anonymous fellowship meeting or a smart recovery meeting, or, help them engage with services if that's what's needed. And I think, we used to do something similar, even the brief interventions program that we had around alcohol. We had a national brief interventions program and it was a huge success, and then we pulled it. We were catching people much earlier with their problematic use, but yeah, I'm 100% on board with that.
I'm probably dreaming, and it might never happen in my lifetime, but to have a more centralized funding that over a longer period of time. I'm sick of seeing funding that's released for 2 years, 3 years, even 5 years. It's not enough. 5 years is not enough to solve for a charity like mine to build up community initiatives, to get them to the point of being self-sustaining, where it doesn't need infrastructure and our guidance around it. It's not like 2 years isn't long enough, 3 years isn't long enough. So the way the funding is released, deployed, what it's there for, and how long it's there for doesn't
Yeah.
really give it a chance. It's kind of setting up to fail, for want of a better
Absolutely,
word, to
Charlie.
be
There
frank with
was
you.
There was a contract went out recently for the Clero work, and when I was approached about it, I thought this is already a done deal. I'm just making up the numbers here, but they assured me I wasn't, and I entered into the process of applying anyway. 2 weeks in, two of us working full time. I've got another envelope and another envelope and another envelope. This is a bureaucratic maze I'm in. And we've never done anything like this before, and then eventually I phoned the girls from OHID and I said, how long does this process actually take? There's two of us working on it full time here, and there's no end in sight. And she said, oh, normally it would take someone working on it full time, someone experienced who knows about government contracts, 6 weeks. And at that point I said, well, we're out. We don't have that manpower. We don't have that, you know, and I'm pretty sure we were just making up the numbers, Charlie, but
Mm.
um, and are yet to be convinced otherwise, But like you said, all of those barriers there to building an actual lived experience recovery organisation infrastructure. Like we've got something called ARCO, the Association of Recovery Community Organisations, but see, even trying to get funding for a development officer for that, it's like I'm still trying. Like here we are, we set it up 9 years ago, and I'm still trying to get funding for that. And that's not because we've had like professional bid writers help us. It's like the concept of it, like is just out with the purview, in fact, of the funders. I've just finished writing our 3-year report on our advocacy caseworker service, right, which I'll be releasing probably for our AGM in December. But see, even convincing a funder that was needed. So we're like the shelter of the addiction world. Basically, we've got caseworkers who will fight for you to get access to, whatever the treatment is that you're looking for. More often than not, it's rehab, right? That people want to access, and we're not. We've got a real battle on our hands trying to get
Yeah.
people access to that. But we've got caseworkers who, like shelter, will fight for you to get home. We'll fight for you to get whatever your chosen treatment is. But see, convincing funders that that was needed, because they're often funding the very people who are saying there's no access or choice. Problem. People can get access, people can get choice. So they're funding those same organisations, and we're saying, no, actually, there's a huge problem. And it's much easier for the funders to go, yeah, just keep them over there, those disruptive types. Um, so I totally get it. We desperately need that support and infrastructure to be there. And it can't be led. I don't think it can be led by academics, which in, the Cleros case it currently is. I think it has to be led by people like us. It's not that we're not competent, Charlie. We're more than competent. And yeah, it boils my piss, that stuff. Anyway.
Yeah, it's just that so policy needs to change, but it's where the money goes and what it's aligned to. And I have found the government's 10-year strategy quite a difficult read, because it kind of goes in the opposite direction to what I was hoping around criminalisation a lot more. And it isn't really embracing of the lived experience movement at all. It's basically, weed out the troublemakers, either put them in prison or get them into services. They either get better or they don't end off, and that's kind of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and the services are really failing as well. Dame Carol Black spoke at our conference a couple of weeks ago in London, and she was really scathing, like they've been given all this extra money and they're still failing, so.
And services are very expensive. Medicalized or clinicalized addiction services are expensive to run. You've got to have certain buildings and rooms that are fit for purpose. There's so many rules and regulations versus a lived experience movement that doesn't really require any of that. So if you're looking at bang for your buck, mutual aid and lived experience is the one I put my money behind, quite
It's like,
frankly. Investment versus outcomes, it'd be mutual aid all day long.
absolutely, we've got a coffee pot and a bag of donuts. We're working. We're doing it.
And you know what? The mutual aid community, they hold each other to account in a way that no other professional or healthcare worker can speak to a client or a patient. Some of the conversations
Yeah,
are pretty brutal, and you'll never get that in somebody
yeah,
with a lab coat on in a white kind of clinic room really saying, you've gone and done what? Or don't
yeah,
you be bullshitting me. I can tell from the look on your face what you've been up to over the last week
yeah,
or so.
yeah,
It's that real
yeah.
cold hard reality
Well,
of recovery is what you
yeah,
need.
well, their professional standards wouldn't allow them to do those challenges,
Of
and
course
it's
they
not that,
won't.
and it's not that we're not being professional about it. It's just that we've got a different set of standards.
And
Our standards are different. And I think
yeah.
in time I would love to see those professional standards for the recovery community. Certainly a set of professional guidelines and standards for us that are completely different. Because I remember one of my first jobs was advocating actually for people who were trying to access treatment, but as part of that role, I was also doing counselling,
Mm.
and I was telling in supervision, I was telling my supervisor, what had happened in this one of the sessions, and he said to me, "What, you shared your own experience?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And they're like, "You don't do that, And all throughout my own counselling training, I was told that as well, and I just completely knew in that, because I'm never going to get anywhere with anybody unless I don't share my personal experience. So, like, those guidelines and standards are different for us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and
really
actually,
are.
one of the things struck me. I went up to Newcastle to recovery conference, and the director of public health was there. And I thought, hang on a minute, it is actually this is a public health issue. Addiction is a public health issue, and I wonder how many directors of public health have got that in their portfolio. And how many public health campaigns have I ever seen on the TV or in the news or in the newspapers that addiction is everywhere? If you're sat in an open plan office with 100 colleagues, I guarantee you at least 10 of them will have experienced some form of problematic behaviour in their lives. At least half of them have probably ripped the top off a bottle of wine or a beer at the end of a stressful day to self-medicate, or they've drank themselves through a bereavement or something like that. You know, I'm disruptive like you, and I would love to see, where are the public health campaigns that say, you're sat on a bus right now, look around you. You know, and it won't be the obvious, the little old lady sat there who's addicted to her opioid medication and has been for 20 years, the guy in the pinstripe suit who's just driven his fancy car into the office, who's been sniffing cocaine all night because of the stress of the job, because they cannot face what they're about to get into. It's all around us all the time, and it's just so frustrating that it's not in the public domain's consciousness in that way. But there are no public health messages or campaigns. There's bowel screening, there's mammographies, there's check your breasts, there's look at your prostate, there's stop smoking, there's all of that campaigning going on, yet there's nothing to say, do you know what, this is a problem in society and it's all around us, so let's
and Charlie,
compassion.
There won't be until there's people like you and me in those positions.
I know.
I genuinely believe that until the leadership throughout the public health world and the government and all our social structures, you know, until we've got people in recovery and leadership positions, we're not going to see it until that happens. But that will happen eventually, because it's only a matter of time, Charlie, you know, and it really is. I'd like to see it happen sooner rather than later, but it's only a matter of time, because there's generations of people now who are well. I can ask you for a couple of personal insights and goals, like what originally drew you to the work with Smart, and if somebody's struggling or listening to this, how, and they may be unsure about joining Smart, what would you say to them to encourage participation?
Okay, so the first bit is, before I came to work for Smart Recovery, which was ironically during the pandemic, I had a 20-odd year career in the NHS. And I was a student as well for a long time. And I studied a subject around smoking, cigarette smoking during pregnancy. So my first, apart from, I'll talk about lived experience in my family, but my first kind of professional experience of addiction was around that. And how difficult women, even if they're carrying a baby, find it to stop smoking. Also in my life, sadly, addiction is in my family, in my loved ones. We sadly lost a member of my family to alcohol addiction. She lost her life, and her children have really struggled all their life, again, with problematic behaviours and addiction. So it is all through my family, and has had some really tragic circumstances. So I have a personal investment in this, because I've seen it destroy members of my family. I've also seen addiction destroy friends' lives as well. I have lost friends to taking their own lives because of gambling and substance use as well. So I've personally experienced quite a lot of it in my 48 years on this planet, and some of it from a reasonably young age. So I've always had an awareness, and I've always been aware of the damage that it's done. I then had that professional experience of, you know, the grip of addiction, and really looking into it as well. And I've always been really I've always worked in the public sector. I've never worked in business. It's just my calling. I'm not a corporate kind of naturally corporate kind of person. I can do corporate, but it's not my natural calling. So I've always had these sort of altruistic roles in life. I had the classic, got into my mid-40s, I've had my children, a bit bored with my career, wondering what's next, feeling a little bit disillusioned and not sure where to move. I had some coaching, and lots of my friends and family was, you know, the charity sector's calling out for you. You'd be perfect, give it a go, and started looking for roles. So I got drawn into Smart because I saw the advert for the role, but then when I looked into what it did, there was just some kind of gut feeling of just, I'm going to apply for this. This is, wow, this is amazing. I would absolutely love. So some feeling of kind of passion or emotional investment in the role and in the organisation absolutely triggered me to apply, and it just all felt very natural. So what I would say to anybody out there listening at the moment, whether it's yourself or a loved one or a colleague or someone you know, and you either know that there's a problem or something they're struggling with, or you might just be observing some changes. Maybe a colleague you're working with is turning up a bit late or isn't quite performing as the way that they used to, or you've noticed a few mood swings, or they're a bit more absent, or anybody in your family at all. There are ways to be non-judgmental and open up a conversation. So Smart Recovery is here for you because we have our 4-point program, but we also have a family and friends program as well. So whether it's yourself or someone you know, Smart Recovery can help. Everything we provide is free at the point of care, and nearly all of it is accessible online and anonymously. All you have to do is Google us and find our website, and all the access to the help is there. But the most difficult step is taking the first step to get that help. So if it's you I'm talking to, where your life may have fallen into a routine that you're not happy with, or you know that you're causing damage to yourself or your loved ones, please know you're not alone. There's loads of people out there just like you. And if you're not sure and you just want to connect to a community, please reach out to any recovery organisation that you feel comfortable, whether it's a 12-step fellowship, whether it's the Dharma approach, whether it's Smart Recovery or something else. Please don't suffer in silence, because we're here for you, and we will never, ever judge you and see you as your behaviours. And that's what I want to say to anybody is, the rest of society may judge you, and you may have all kinds of stigmatizing arrows shot at you, but the recovery community won't. So all you've got to do, I say it sounds easy, but just try and connect with us, or 12-step or anybody else. Just try and make that connection and try and be brave just for a tiny little moment, and you won't believe the power of mutual aid. And there's people out there like you who are ready and willing to help.
Yeah, brilliant, Charlie.
Yeah, don't suffer in silence. No one is immune to addiction, and please don't suffer in silence is my 2 main messages.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I echo your sentiments very, very strongly. Like you're no longer alone, like reach it. There is help, there's definitely help. It might not be the type of help you think you need, but it might be exactly what you need as well.
Yeah.
And like you said, Charlie.
And it is a bit like a gym membership. You can't just turn up to the gym and watch everybody else and expect to get fit and well yourself. You've got to put the effort in. Recovery is hard. It's a tough gig. It's not going to be easy, but it's damn well worth it. 100% every time.
Yeah, it's a lot easier than the alternative, Charlie. Like you said, like harming myself and harming my family and the people around about me, and even, the denial that I'm not really harming anybody. I know for me, I was like, well, I'm not even harming myself, and it wasn't until I got a bit of perspective, a bit of abstinence actually, and a bit of sobriety. I was like, oh my God, I was really harming myself. Like my denial was really, really strong, and we know that that's a big part of this condition as well. So finally, I mean, your long-term goals for smart recovery, Charlie, you want to tell us a wee bit, maybe how do you envision the organisation hopefully growing in the coming years? Have you got any plans to take that forward, and how can Favour UK help in any way possible?
Got loads of plans. We've got plans. So we want to grow smart. So we want to be as accessible to as many people as possible. Full stop, end of story. Always free at the point of care, because our business model is we get revenue through services commissioning our program. So we always want it to be free at the point of care. We want it to be accessible by as many people as possible. We would love more people to know about the family and friends program in particular. Not many people know about it. It kind of sits in the shadows. And again, the analogy is, if I get ill tomorrow, have a car crash or something, and I end up in an ICU bed for the next 6 months, the funding is there to support me and get me better. I'm the one that's in the ICU bed, and all the money is going to go to me and treating me. there is no support or money for all my family and friends that sat around my bedside for that 6 months suffering and wondering what on earth to do. And there's no support for them when I come out of hospital and I need a load of their support too. So the family and friends program is really important, and I would love more people to access it and know about it and to become more facilitators. We're always looking for volunteers to train as smart recovery facilitators. So our volunteer workforce is really important to us. Funnily enough, we've got our first volunteer recognition awards tonight
Brilliant.
online, a big ceremony that we're doing at 6 o'clock. So the volunteer workforce is incredibly important. We want to look after you and we want you to join us. We are also developing our programs. So we've got plans to refresh and update our Start Smart program, which is for young people. And we will be developing Smart for Gambling, like a gambling program to help
Brilliant.
that as well. So we're
Much
going to be,
needed.
so we're developing our programs that address that segmentation. And we absolutely need to look at the gambling program. We're hoping that the statutory levy is going to be, the recommendation is going to be pushed through, because I think until it's statutory, there's lots of issues around that levy and the money and how it's used. And we will be expanding our veteran program. So we've just launched that too. So we're hoping to get some decent uptake for our veterans program as well. But essentially, it's all about access, growth, and developing our programs to meet specific needs.
Brilliant, Charlie.
And in terms of
Absolutely.
favour, it's being the voice. You are the face and voice of recovery. I love the way you're positively disruptive. Like I've said to you before, I think we do need to shove this problem in people's faces. We do need to challenge the policymakers, and we do need to really break down the stigma and the judgmental attitude that people have. If subjects like HIV, eating disorders, suicide have made it into the public consciousness where we're non-judgmental and we're accepting, then why on earth can't we do the same for people with addiction?
Yeah.
And that's what you do, is you provide the voice and the face, and you bring together on an annual basis the whole recovery community in the walk, the Favour Recovery Walk, and the conference, which is massively appreciated by us. So yeah, thank you for
Oh,
what you
thanks,
do.
Charlie. Thanks for, yeah, I really appreciate that, mate, because the more outspoken we are in this sector, it seems to be the more people we piss off. So and the reason why we're pissing people off is because we want more help for the people that are suffering, like that is our primary purpose. Our primary purpose is to get as much access and as much choice, more choices, more chances, and it doesn't matter what the pathway is, we need more of them, that's what, like you said, what works for one person might not work for another, and even what works for me today might not work tomorrow. So we need that constant access and choice, and that's all we're asking for, a balanced treatment system that offers access and choice. It's not rocket science, but maybe the way that we ask for it is we've moved into a less amiable narrative, and we're demanding of it, and we're asking the services also to do a lot better, and we're asking them. This is why we piss people off. We're asking them to stop working in isolation, conflict, and competition with each other. We're asking them to work as a unified sector, and they've been reared on the conflict and competition and isolation. They do know how to do what you and I are doing. Like, comes totally naturally to us. They do know how to do that. So,
Yeah.
so thank you. I really appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate you agreeing to speak today. And who knows, I know from experience that somebody someday will be telling their story, and they'll say they heard this lovely pink-haired English woman and this rosy-cheeked Scottish woman talking on YouTube one day, and that will be somebody's story, and it will be how even if it does that one person, it's been well worth.
I was just about to say, if we've resonated with one person today, that's brilliant. Or if one person that this just helps them to nudge them towards looking into it or accessing some mutual aid, then that's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah, Charlie, God bless you. And thank you so much for everything that you're doing and all the team at Smart Recovery. And, more power to you, Rebel. I hope you continue to grow and grow right across the UK and across the world.
Oh, and you, Anne Marie, thanks ever so much for having me.
God bless.
You're a joy to work with.